The morning sun crept over the Wyoming territory like a cautious traveler, painting the frost-covered grass in shades of amber and gold. October 1889 had arrived with teeth, bringing early frost that warned of the harsh winter ahead. Cole Thatcher pulled his coat tighter as he rode alongside the herd, his breath forming small clouds in the crisp air. "Easy there," he murmured to his horse, a sturdy bay mare named Sage, as she picked her way through the rocky terrain of Devil's Pass. The cattle moved slowly ahead, their lowing echoing off the canyon walls. In the distance, the whistle of the Union Pacific pierced the morning quiet, a sound that had become as common as birdsong in these parts, though no less intrusive to Cole's ears. His fellow cowboys, Jake and Tom, flanked the herd on either side. They'd been driving cattle through this pass for 3 days now, heading back to the Double T Ranch before the snows came. Cole's eyes constantly scanned the ridgeline above, a habit left over from his days as a frontier scout. Old instincts died hard, especially when you'd seen what he'd seen. "Boss," Jake's voice cut through his thoughts. "Got a stray heading for the edge." Cole spotted it immediately, a young calf, spooked by something, careening toward the steep drop-off. Without thinking, he spurred Sage forward, cutting across the rocky slope at a dangerous angle. His rope was in his hand before he'd fully formed the plan, the loop sailing through the air with practiced precision. It caught the calf around the neck just as its front hooves scraped the edge. "Whoa, little one," Cole said softly, backing Sage up slowly, drawing the frightened animal away from certain death. The calf bawled pitifully, but it was safe. He dismounted and removed the rope, running a gentle hand along the animal's flank. "You're all right now. Back to your mama." Tom rode up, shaking his head with a grin. "Still got those scout reflexes, eh, Cole?" "Just doing what needs doing," Cole replied, but he couldn't help the small smile that tugged at his weathered face. These moments, the simple act of preservation in a world that seemed bent on taking they mattered to him more than he'd ever say aloud. Meanwhile, 15 miles south, the town of Sagebrush Forks was waking to its own rhythms. Evelyn Hart stepped down from the freight car that had served as her passage, her traveling dress dusty from the journey. The platform bustled with activity merchants unloading goods, travelers hurrying to and fro, the general chaos of a town grown fat on railroad money. She clutched her worn carpet bag tighter. Inside it, everything she owned in the world: 2 dresses, her mother's Bible, her teaching certificate, and $14 that had to last until her first wages. The weight of her purpose here pressed on her shoulders like a yoke. Pay the debts, send money to her ailing mother, build something respectable from the ashes of their misfortune. Grady's General Store loomed before her, its painted sign proclaiming fair prices and square dealings. She knew better than to believe advertising, but she had little choice. Her mother's debt to Silas Grady had followed them even here, to this dust-blown corner of Wyoming. The bell above the door jangled as she entered. The store smelled of pickle brine, leather, and kerosene, the universal perfume of frontier commerce. Behind the counter stood Silas Grady himself, a man whose smile never quite reached his eyes. "Miss Hart," he said, consulting a ledger. "Come to settle your account. I trust—" "The monthly payment, yes." She placed $5 on the counter, nearly half her remaining funds. "As agreed." Grady's pencil scratched across the page. "With the interest, naturally, and the transfer fee for managing the debt from Missouri. That brings your payment to $7. Evelyn's heart sank, but she kept her expression neutral. She'd learned that showing weakness to men like Grady only invited more exploitation. The agreement was $5 monthly. "The agreement," Grady said smoothly, "allows for reasonable fees. Unless you'd prefer, I call in the full amount immediately." She placed $2 more on the counter, her hand trembling slightly. "No, sir." "Wise choice. I hear you'll be teaching our local children. Noble work, though it pays poorly. If you find yourself in need of additional arrangements, My door is always open." The implication in his tone made her skin crawl, but she merely nodded and left. Outside, she allowed herself one moment to close her eyes and breathe deeply. Then she straightened her spine and walked toward the schoolhouse at the edge of town. The building was small but sturdy, built of local timber with real glass windows, a luxury in these parts. Inside, dusty sunbeams illuminated rows of rough-hewn benches and a single blackboard. It would do. It would have to. Her first students arrived within the hour, a motley collection of ranch children and town youngsters. Among them was a small girl who hung back at the doorway, her dark eyes wide with what looked like fear. "Good morning," Evelyn said gently. "I'm Miss Hart. What's your name?" The girl didn't answer, pressing herself against the doorframe as if trying to disappear. "That's May," offered an older boy. "She don't talk much since her PA died. Lives with her Uncle Cole now. Out at the Double T." Evelyn's heart went out to the child. She reached into her bag and pulled out a piece of biscuit wrapped in cloth, part of her meager lunch. "Would you like to help me? May, I need someone to pass out these letters I've written on cards." Slowly, cautiously, like a wild creature deciding whether to trust, May crept forward. When she took the biscuit, Evelyn saw intelligence flickering behind the fear. Here was a child who'd learned too young that the world could be cruel. The day passed in a blur of alphabet recitations, basic arithmetic, and the constant challenge of holding the attention of children more accustomed to ranch work than book learning. But Evelyn found unexpected joy in it. When young Sam Mitchell finally grasped the concept of addition, his face lit up like sunrise. When May, still silent, correctly arranged the letter cards to spell cat, she almost smiled. As afternoon shadows grew long, Evelyn dismissed her students and began tidying the classroom. Her body ached from standing all day, and hunger gnawed at her stomach. She'd given most of her food to May, but she'd done it. The first day was behind her. That evening, in the small room she rented above the millinery shop, Evelyn sat by the window, writing to her mother by lamplight. "Dearest Mother, I have arrived safely in Sagebrush Forks and begun my teaching duties. The children are eager to learn, though some carry burdens too heavy for their years. I think of you constantly and pray your health improves. I have made the first payment to Mr. Grady, though he has added fees I didn't expect. But don't worry, I will manage. I will keep our name clean and make you proud. The West is hard, as you warned, but I am harder. Your devoted daughter, Evelyn." She sealed the letter with a drop of wax, trying not to think about how she'd afford the postage. Outside her window, the wind picked up, rattling the glass and carrying with it the promise of the bitter season ahead. Miles away, Cole Thatcher and his men had made camp for the night. The cattle were settled, the watch was set, and the campfire crackled cheerfully against the darkness. But Cole couldn't shake the unease that had followed him all day. Maybe it was the early frost, or the way the coyotes called from the ridges, or simply the weight of another autumn without his brother. "You're thinking too hard again," Tom said, passing him a cup of coffee. "That's what puts lines on a man's face." Cole accepted the coffee gratefully. "Just wondering what this winter will bring?" "Same as every winter," Jake offered from across the fire. "Cold, snow, and trying to keep the stock alive." But Cole wasn't thinking about the cattle. He was thinking about that moment with the calf at the cliff's edge, about the instinct to save what could be saved. He was thinking about his niece May, waiting at home, still barely speaking 3 months after they'd buried his brother. He was thinking about the debts that pressed on small ranchers like him, and men like Silas Grady, who circled like vultures, waiting for the week to fall. "Winter's coming early," he said finally. "We'd best be ready for whatever it brings." In Sagebrush Forks, Evelyn blew out her lamp and prepared for bed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. She had no illusions about that. But tonight, she'd done what she came to do. She'd begun. The wind howled through the darkness, carrying the distant whistle of another train. Another load of dreamers and schemers heading west, and somewhere between the schoolhouse and the range, between duty and hope. Two lives moved on parallel tracks, not yet knowing they were destined to meet at the creek where clear water ran over ancient stones, where everything would change. The October sun blazed overhead despite the morning frost. One of those peculiar autumn days when summer made a final stand against the coming winter. Evelyn had been in Sagebrush Forks for 2 weeks now, and the rhythms of frontier life were becoming familiar. The 5 a.m. freight train whistle, the lowing of cattle being driven to market, the constant wind that found every gap in the schoolhouse walls. It was Saturday, which meant no classes and a chance to catch up on the endless chores that teaching wages barely covered. Her small pile of laundry had grown too large to ignore, and the creek, a half-mile outside town, offered both privacy and clean water. She'd learned from Mrs. Patterson at the boarding house that the women of Sagebrush Forks had an unspoken schedule for creek visits. Early morning was for the married ladies, late morning for the working women, and afternoon for the ranch wives who came to town on Saturdays. Evelyn set out just after noon with her washing bundle, following the well-worn path through the sage and juniper. The creek ran clear and cold from the mountains, pooling in several spots where industrious souls had arranged rocks to create natural washing basins. She found a secluded spot downstream, screened by a thick stand of willows and cottonwoods. The water was shockingly cold as she knelt to scrub her 2 dresses and underthings. Her hands soon turned red and raw, but the physical discomfort was almost welcome. It distracted from the constant worry about money, about her mother's last letter describing worsening health, about Grady's calculating looks whenever she passed his store. When the washing was done and spread on the bushes to dry, Evelyn considered the sun-warmed pool before her. She'd been wearing the same dress for 3 days while the other dried, and the accumulated dust and sweat of classroom work made her skin itch. A quick glance around confirmed she was alone. The ranch wives wouldn't arrive for at least an hour. The cold water took her breath away as she waded in. But after the initial shock, it felt glorious. For a few precious minutes, she let herself forget everything: the debts, the loneliness, the weight of respectability she carried like armor. She was just a young woman in clear water under an endless sky. Cole Thatcher had been riding since dawn, checking the fence lines on the eastern edge of his property. Someone had been cutting wire, probably Grady's men trying to pressure him to sell, and he needed to document the damage before riding to town to report it to Sheriff Pike. Dusty and tired, he decided to water his horse at the creek before heading in. He was leading Sage down the familiar path when he heard a splash of water, too large to be an animal. Cole immediately stopped, his scout's instincts kicking in. Through the screen of willows, he caught a glimpse of movement in the pool and realized with a shock what he was seeing. Without hesitation, Cole turned his back, heat flooding his face. "Ma'am," he called out, his voice carefully controlled. "I apologize. I didn't know anyone was here. I'm leaving my coat on this bush and heading back up the trail. Please take your time." He shrugged off his canvas duster and draped it over a prominent branch where it could easily be seen, then led Sage back up the path, putting distance between himself and the creek. His hands shook slightly as he tied the horse to a juniper, and he cursed himself for not being more careful. The last thing any woman needed was to feel unsafe in this rough country. Neither Cole nor Evelyn noticed the third party present at the creek that day. Bert Hutchins, one of Grady's hired hands, had been sleeping off a drunk in a thicket upstream when voices woke him. Always eager for information that might please his boss, he crept closer and saw an opportunity too good to pass up. While Cole waited a respectable distance away and Evelyn hurriedly dressed behind the willows, Bert sketched what he'd observed in crude lines on a piece of paper. Not the actual scene, even he wasn't that stupid, but an exaggerated, suggestive version that would serve Grady's purposes perfectly. He slipped away through the brush, already imagining his reward. Evelyn emerged from the willows, fully dressed but flustered, her wet hair hastily pinned up. She found the coat immediately good quality canvas, worn but well maintained. A working man's coat. Her face burned with embarrassment, but also with gratitude for the unknown man's courtesy. She gathered her washing quickly, her hands trembling. The peace of the afternoon had been shattered, replaced by the cold reminder of how vulnerable she was here. One careless moment, one person with bad intentions, and her reputation, the only currency a teacher had, would be destroyed. By evening, the damage was already spreading like wildfire through sagebrush forks. Bert had taken his sketch to the print shop Grady secretly owned, and by nightfall, crude handbills were making their rounds in the saloons and bunkhouses. The headline screamed in bold letters, "The virgin bathing by the creek didn't know her first night would belong to the cowboy who watch." The illustration below was worse, a grotesque caricature that suggested far more than had actually occurred. No names were mentioned, but in a town this small, it wouldn't take long for people to connect the new schoolmarm with the scandal. Cole first heard about it at Murphy's saloon, where he'd gone after filing his fence-cutting report with Sheriff Pike. The place went quiet when he walked in, never a good sign. At the bar, Jake held one of the handbills, his face grim. "Boss, you need to see this," Jake said quietly, sliding the paper across the bar. Cole read it once, twice, his jaw tightening with each word. The coat mentioned in the lurid text, it could only be his. He'd recognized the woman at the creek as the new teacher, the one caring for his niece May. And now this filth was spreading through town like poison. "Where did these come from?" His voice was dangerously quiet. "Don't know," Murphy said from behind the bar. "Found a stack of them shoved under my door. Same happened at the other saloons, the boarding houses. Whoever done it wanted everyone to see." Cole crumpled the paper in his fist. He knew Grady's hand when he saw it. The man had been pressuring him to sell for months. And now he was targeting an innocent woman to create scandal, to destabilize the community that might stand against him. "Anyone spreading these lies will answer to me," Cole announced to the room at large. Several men looked away guiltily. "That woman is a respectable teacher who's done nothing but help our children. I was at that creek today. My horse needed water. I heard someone bathing and immediately left the area, leaving my coat as a courtesy to ensure the lady's privacy. Anyone who says different is calling me a liar." The room remained silent. Cole's reputation as a man of his word and his skill with both fists and firearms was well known. "Jake, Tom," he continued, "help me gather up these papers, every last one." But the damage was already spreading beyond what 3 men could contain. At the boarding house, Evelyn heard the whispers stop when she entered the dining room. Mrs. Patterson, usually friendly, served her dinner with pursed lips and averted eyes. The other boarders, the telegraph operator, the bank clerk, the milliner, suddenly had urgent business elsewhere. It wasn't until she returned to her room that Evelyn found out why. Someone had slipped one of the handbills under her door. Her hands shook as she read it, each word a nail in the coffin of her reputation. The illustration made her physically ill. She sank onto her narrow bed, the paper crumpling in her trembling hands. Everything she'd worked for, sacrificed for, could be destroyed by this lie. Her position at the school, her ability to pay her mother's debts, her future, all of it balanced on the knife's edge of public opinion. And in a frontier town, a woman's reputation once lost was gone forever. A soft knock at her door made her jump. "Miss Hart?" It was Mrs. Patterson's voice, but colder than before. "There's a gentleman asking for you in the parlor. Says it's urgent." Evelyn's heart raced. Who would call on her at this hour? She smoothed her dress and hair, trying to gather the scattered pieces of her dignity. Whatever came next, she would face it with her head high. In the parlor, Cole Thatcher stood hat in hand, his weathered face grave. He was younger than she'd expected from his reputation, but there was something solid about him, like bedrock exposed by wind and water. "Miss Hart," he began without preamble, "I owe you an apology. I was at the creek today." "It was you." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Yes, ma'am. I left immediately and tried to ensure your privacy, but it seems someone else was there. Someone who's now spreading lies for their own purposes." He met her eyes directly. "I want you to know I'll do everything in my power to stop this and clear your name. My word carries weight in this town, and I'll use it." Evelyn studied his face, looking for deception and finding none. Just weariness and genuine anger, not at her, but at the situation. "Why would you do that? You don't know me. I know you're teaching my niece May. I know you're the first person to make her almost smile since we buried her father. That's enough." He paused, then added quietly, "And I know what it's like to have lies told about you. My brother died because of false accusations. I won't let that happen to anyone else if I can help it." The clock on the mantel ticked loudly in the silence that followed. Finally, Evelyn nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Thatcher. I don't know what else to say." "You don't need to say anything, ma'am. Just keep teaching. This town needs you more than it needs another scandal." He placed his hat back on his head. "I'll be speaking to Sheriff Pike first thing in the morning. We'll find out who's behind this." After he left, Evelyn sat alone in the parlor for a long time. Outside, she could hear the Saturday night revelry from the saloons, the distant whistle of the late train. The world went on as if nothing had changed, but she knew better. The creek that had offered her a moment's respite had become the source of her potential downfall. Yet something else had happened today, too. A stranger had stood up for her, offered his protection without asking anything in return, in a land where women were often seen as property or prey. Cole Thatcher had shown her respect and kindness. She thought of his words, "This town needs you more than it needs another scandal." Perhaps he was right. Perhaps the children she taught, like silent little May, needed her to be stronger than the lies being spread about her. Evelyn rose and climbed the stairs to her room. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. She knew. The whispers would grow louder before they grew quiet. But tonight, she had an unexpected ally, and that was more than she'd had this morning. In his ranch house, Cole sat by the dying fire, May long since asleep in her bed. He turned the crumpled handbill over in his hands, thinking Grady had finally shown his hand, revealed how low he'd stoop. The man wanted to break the spirit of everyone who stood in his way, Cole, by attacking his land, the teacher by attacking her reputation. Well, Grady had made a mistake. He'd given Cole a reason to fight that went beyond wire fences and water rights. He'd threatened an innocent woman who was probably the only hope his traumatized niece had for a normal life. Cole fed the handbill to the flames, watching it curl and blacken. Tomorrow, he'd start gathering allies. Tomorrow, the real fight would begin. But tonight, he simply sat and planned, while outside the October wind howled across the empty range, carrying with it the promise of storms to come. The morning after the handbills appeared, Evelyn walked to Nora Burns' blacksmith shop on the edge of town. She needed horseshoe nails to repair a loose board in the schoolhouse floor. But more than that, she needed to face the town's judgment head-on. Hiding would only fuel the gossip. The ring of hammer on anvil grew louder as she approached. Nora Byrne was an anomaly in Sagebrush Forks, a woman who'd taken over her late husband's smithy and made it thrive through sheer skill and determination. If anyone would understand fighting for respectability, it would be her. "Morning, Miss Hart," Nora called out, not pausing in her work. The blacksmith was a sturdy woman of 30, her arms corded with muscle, her face honest and open despite the soot. "Heard you might be stopping by." "You heard?" Evelyn tried to keep the tremor from her voice. Nora finally looked up, her green eyes direct. "Cole Thatcher was here at first light, told me the truth of what happened at the creek. Also told me about those filthy papers." She plunged a glowing horseshoe into the water barrel with a violent hiss. "Some folks got nothing better to do than spread poison." "Then you don't believe that Cole Thatcher would compromise a woman that boy was raised right by his mama? God rest her. He told me he left his coat and walked away. And Cole's word is iron in this town." Nora wiped her hands on her leather apron. Besides, I know Grady's work when I see it. Man's been trying to run folks off their land for months. Figured it was only a matter of time before he started targeting women. Evelyn felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. Thank you, Mrs. Byrne. It's Nora, and don't thank me yet. Not everyone in town has sense. You'll face some hard looks and harder words before this is over. She selected a handful of nails from a barrel. But you'll also find out who your real friends are. That's worth something. As if to prove her point, 3 women entered the smithy, just then wives of local merchants, their faces pinched with disapproval. They took one look at Evelyn and turned to leave. Martha Holcomb. Nora's voice cracked like a whip. You need those pot hooks fixed or not? Mrs. Holcomb hesitated, clearly torn between her need and her desire to shun the scandalous teacher. Perhaps I'll come back later. Perhaps you'll remember that your boy Samuel couldn't read a lick before Miss Hart came to town. Nora shot back. Perhaps you'll remember Christian charity before you go believing every lie printed on cheap paper. The women fled, but Evelyn could hear their whispers starting before they even cleared the door. She closed her eyes briefly, steeling herself. This was only the beginning. Nora, she said quietly, what do you know about Grady's interest in the land around here? The blacksmith's expression darkened. More than I'd like. He's been buying up debts, calling in loans, finding ways to pressure folks to sell. Word is he's working for some railroad syndicate that wants to control the whole valley. Water rights, grazing land, mineral rights, all of it. And Cole Thatcher's ranch sits right on the best water source for miles. Grady's been after it since Cole's brother died. Some say that wasn't an accident either, but Nora shrugged. Proving it is another matter. Evelyn paid for the nails and left, her mind churning. She was beginning to understand that the attack on her reputation wasn't random. It was part of something larger, uglier. But understanding didn't make the walk through town any easier. At the Mercantile, conversation stopped when she entered. At the post office, the clerk served her with averted eyes. Even some of her students' parents pulled their children aside when they saw her coming. By the time she reached the schoolhouse, her carefully maintained composure was hanging by a thread. She found Cole Thatcher waiting by the door, his hat in his hands. With him was Sheriff Amos Pike, a man who somehow managed to look both authoritative and uncertain at the same time. Miss Hart, the sheriff began, his weathered face uncomfortable. I need to ask you about yesterday's incident at the creek. There was no incident, Evelyn said firmly. I was washing laundry. Someone, she glanced at Cole, approached unknowingly and immediately left upon realizing I was there. That person showed nothing but courtesy and respect. Pike shifted his weight. That matches what Mr. Thatcher told me. But these papers are lies, Cole interrupted. And I want to know who printed them. Now, Cole, Pike hedged. Freedom of the press and all that. This isn't press, it's slander, maybe worse. Cole's voice had gone quiet in that way Evelyn was beginning to recognize meant danger. Someone was watching Miss Hart without her knowledge. That's a crime in any law book. The sheriff looked even more uncomfortable. I'll look into it, but without proof of who made those papers. Then find proof, Cole said flatly. Or I will. After Pike left, mumbling about investigations, Cole turned to Evelyn. How are you holding up? She wanted to lie, to say she was fine, but something about his steady gaze made pretense impossible. They're treating me like I have the plague. Some of the parents are already talking about pulling their children from school. They'll come around. Most folks are sheep, they follow whoever bleats loudest. Right now, that's the gossips, but that'll change. He paused, seeming to wrestle with something. Miss Hart, I know this is irregular, but I'd like to hire you for some private tutoring. Evelyn blinked in surprise. For May? She needs help, more than she can get in a classroom with 20 other children. I'll pay fairly $1 an hour, 2 hours every other evening. You could come out to the ranch, work with her where she's comfortable. She understood what he was really offering: visible support, a show of trust that might influence others, but she also heard the genuine concern for his niece. "That's very generous, Mr. Thatcher." "It's practical. And it's Cole, mister. Thatcher was my father." He settled his hat back on his head. "Think about it. First lesson could be tomorrow if you're willing." That evening, a sandstorm rolled in from the west, turning the sunset into a dirty orange smear. The wind howled through every crack in the schoolhouse, piling dust on the desks Evelyn had just cleaned. She was struggling to secure a loose shutter when she heard voices outside. "Should be run out of town. That's what I say." She recognized the voice Mrs. Dalworth, president of the Ladies' Temperance Society. "Now, Agnes," another voice protested. That was Reverend Hale. "We shouldn't judge without facts." Facts. The facts are that a woman of loose morals is teaching our children. What kind of example is that? Evelyn's hands clenched on the shutter. She wanted to march outside, to defend herself, but knew it would only make things worse. Instead, she listened as other voices joined in, some condemning, others defending, most just uncertain. Then came a voice that cut through the rest like a knife. "Anybody who thinks Miss Hart is of loose morals is a damn fool." "Cole." Evelyn peered through the window to see him standing with a group of townspeople, his ranch hands flanking him. The crowd had grown. It seemed half the town had ventured out despite the storm. "You watch your language." "Thatcher, Mrs." Dalworth snapped. "I'll watch my language when you watch yours." Cole replied evenly. "That woman in there has done nothing but help this town. She's teaching kids who couldn't write their own names. She gave her lunch to my niece when May was too scared to eat. And you want to run her out over a lie?" "How do we know it's a lie?" someone called out. Cole's voice went deadly quiet. "Because I'm telling you it is. Because I was there, and I know what happened. And if my word isn't good enough, then maybe this town isn't what I thought it was." The threat implicit in his words that he might leave, take his ranch and his business elsewhere, rippled through the crowd. The Double T might be small, but Cole employed 6 men full-time and more during Roundup. He paid fair wages, bought local, supported the town. His leaving would hurt. "Besides," Jake added from beside his boss, "anybody who knows Cole knows he wouldn't. Well, he just wouldn't. Man won't even court a widow proper without a year of mourning past. Too much respect for womenfolk." A murmur of agreement went through some of the crowd. Cole's reputation for old-fashioned propriety was well known, sometimes even mocked by the rougher elements. That reputation served him now. "This discussion is over," Cole announced. "Miss Hart will continue teaching. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me personally." He looked around the crowd, meeting eyes until people looked away. "Now go home before this storm gets worse." The crowd dispersed slowly, argumentatively, but they dispersed. Evelyn watched Cole stand there until the last person left, the wind whipping his coat around him. Then he turned and saw her in the window. He touched his hat brim, a small gesture, but it warmed her more than a fire would have. The next morning brought a small miracle. When Evelyn arrived at school, she found May already there, sitting on the steps. The little girl stood when she saw her teacher and held out a piece of paper. Written in careful, childish letters were the words, "Thank you." Evelyn's eyes misted. "You're very welcome. May, would you like to help me prepare for class?" May nodded, almost smiling. They worked together in companionable silence, setting out slates and organizing books. When the other children arrived, some came reluctantly, pushed by parents who weren't sure, but they came. The day progressed almost normally until lunch, when Sheriff Pike appeared with news. "Found something interesting," he told Evelyn quietly while the children ate outside. "That print shop on 3rd Street, the one that does the newspaper, they had a break-in 2 nights ago. Someone used their equipment without permission." "How convenient." Evelyn said dryly. Isn't it just— Pike's expression was sour. No way to prove who did it, of course. But I had a word with Ed Garrett, who runs the place. He's putting locks on his equipment and sleeping in the shop with a shotgun. Won't happen again. It was something, at least. Evelyn thanked him and went back to teaching, trying to ignore the way some of the children whispered and pointed. Rome wasn't built in a day, and reputations weren't rebuilt in one either. That evening, she made her first trip to the Double T Ranch for May's tutoring session. The ride out was peaceful, the storm having blown itself out, leaving crystal clear air that made the mountains seem close enough to touch. The ranch was modest but well kept, a 2-story frame house, a solid barn, corrals in good repair. Cole met her at the door, May hiding behind his legs. Welcome, Miss Hart. We've set up in the kitchen, best light there. The kitchen was warm and homey, with checked curtains and a scarred wooden table that had seen years of use. May had her primer ready, along with a slate and chalk. For the first hour, Evelyn worked on basic letters and sounds, using patience and gentle encouragement to draw the girl out. Then, breakthrough. May pointed at a picture of a cat and whispered, "Cat," the first word Evelyn had heard her speak. Cole, who'd been mending harness at the other end of the table, looked up sharply. His eyes met Evelyn's, and she saw hope there, raw and powerful. "Very good, May," Evelyn said softly. "Can you write it?" May nodded and carefully formed the letters, C-A-T. Then she looked up at her uncle and whispered, "Uncle Cole, cat." Cole's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. "That's right, sweetheart. That's a cat." The lesson continued, May growing more confident with each small success. When 2 hours had passed, Cole walked Evelyn out to her borrowed buggy. "Thank you," he said simply. "That's more words than she's spoken in 3 months." "She just needed to feel safe," Evelyn replied. "To know it was okay to try and fail." "Something you understand," Cole observed quietly. Evelyn looked up at him, startled by his perception. "I suppose I do. For what it's worth, Miss Hart, you're the strongest woman I've met since my mother passed. This town needs that strength, whether they know it or not." The compliment, so simply stated, made her throat tight. "Please call me Evelyn, if we're to work together for May's sake. Formality seems pointless." "Evelyn," he repeated, as if testing the name. "Then I'm just Cole." As she drove away, Evelyn reflected on the strange turns her life had taken. She'd come to Sagebrush Forks to hide, to pay debts and disappear into respectable obscurity. Instead, she'd found herself at the center of a scandal, defending her reputation with the help of a taciturn rancher and a traumatized child. But maybe, just maybe, she'd also found something else: community, purpose. The first stirrings of friendship with people like Nora and Cole, who judged her by her actions, not by gossip. The road back to town stretched before her under a canopy of stars. Behind her, a little girl was learning to speak again. Ahead, more challenges waited. But for the first time since arriving in Wyoming, Evelyn Hart felt like she might actually belong here. The handbills might have labeled her with ugly words, but she would write her own story. One lesson, one ally, one small victory at a time. The Harvest Festival came to Sagebrush Forks on the last Saturday of October, bringing with it the scents of apple cider, roasted corn, and fresh-baked pies. Main Street had been transformed with bunting and paper lanterns strung between buildings, their colors bright against the fading afternoon sky. For one day, at least, the town tried to forget its worries and celebrate the season's bounty. Evelyn stood behind the school's booth, helping children paint gourds and make cornhusk dolls. She'd debated whether to participate, knowing the whispers hadn't completely died down. But Nora had convinced her that hiding would only make things worse. "Show them who you really are," the blacksmith had said. "Let them see you with their children." May stood beside her, carefully painting a small pumpkin with yellow and blue flowers. The girl had become Evelyn's constant shadow at public events, her presence a silent but powerful endorsement. In the past 2 weeks, May had progressed from whispers to short sentences, each word a small miracle that Cole celebrated with quiet joy. "Miss Hart," Samuel Holcomb ran up, his face painted like a raccoon. "Look what my mom made." He held up a corn-husk doll, clearly proud. "It's wonderful." "Samuel," Evelyn said warmly. She caught Mrs. Holcomb's eye across the crowd and received a grudging nod. Progress. Slow but real. The festival buzzed with activity, pie judging contests, horseshoe competitions, fiddle music from the makeshift stage. Cole was in the roping contest with his ranch hands, their easy camaraderie drawing cheers from the crowd. Evelyn found herself watching him more than she should, noting the way he encouraged younger competitors, the patient way he helped a boy adjust his rope. "He's a good man," Reverend Hale said, appearing at her elbow. The elderly minister's eyes were kind behind wire spectacles. "Not many would have stood up the way he did for you." "I'm grateful," Evelyn replied carefully. "Gratitude is good," the Reverend mused. "But I see something more when you look at him. And when he looks at you, for that matter." Before Evelyn could respond, a commotion erupted near the town square. Silas Grady had arrived with several of his hired men, and they were distributing papers again. Evelyn's heart sank as she recognized the same lurid headline, the same crude illustration. "Thought folks might have forgotten," Grady announced loudly, his voice carrying over the music. "Important to remember what kind of people are teaching our children." The festive atmosphere curdled like spoiled milk. Parents pulled their children closer. Voices rose in argument, and the fiddler's music scraped to a halt. Cole materialized from the crowd, Jake and Tom flanking him, their faces thunderous. "Grady!" Cole's voice cut through the noise. "You've got some nerve." "Just exercising my right to free speech. Thatcher—" Grady's smile was oily. "Unless you have something to hide." Cole stepped forward, and for a moment, violence crackled in the air. Then May tugged on Evelyn's skirt and held up her painted pumpkin. The small gesture broke through Evelyn's paralysis. "May," she said clearly, her voice carrying, "would you like to show everyone your beautiful painting?" The little girl looked uncertain, but Evelyn took her hand and walked directly toward the confrontation. The crowd parted. Surprised, she stopped in the clear space between Cole and Grady. May pressed close to her side. "Tss, Mr. Grady," Evelyn said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "This child couldn't speak when I met her. Now she can read simple words and paint flowers." "If you'd like to discuss my teaching methods, I'm happy to oblige, but perhaps we could do so without frightening the children." Grady's smirk faltered slightly. It was harder to attack a woman standing there with a child's hand in hers, looking him directly in the eye. "Furthermore," Reverend Hale stepped forward, "this is a harvest celebration, a time for community and thanksgiving." He looked around the crowd. Who among us hasn't made mistakes? Who hasn't needed forgiveness and a second chance? "Let he who is without sin cast the first stone." Pretty words, Reverend? Grady sneered. "But I was at the creek that day," a new voice interrupted. Everyone turned to see Nora Byrne pushing through the crowd. "I go there sometimes to cool iron pieces. Saw the whole thing from upstream." Evelyn's breath caught. This wasn't true. Nora hadn't been there, but the blacksmith continued steadily. "Saw Miss Hart doing laundry. Modest as you please. Saw Cole Thatcher turn away the moment he realized someone was there. Left his coat like a gentleman. Also saw Bert Hutchins hiding in the bushes like a snake." She fixed Grady with a hard stare. "Your man, isn't he?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Bert, standing behind Grady, shifted uncomfortably. "You can't prove," Grady started. "I can testify to what I saw," Nora said firmly. Under oath if need be. So the question is, Mr. Grady, do you want to pursue this matter legally? Because I think Sheriff Pike might be very interested in why your employee was hiding in bushes watching women. Sheriff Pike, who'd been hovering uncertainly at the edge of the crowd, straightened. That's a serious accusation. Nora. It's a serious situation, Sheriff. Cole seized the moment. I propose we settle this here and now. These papers are lies, spread by a man who wants to break our community for his own profit. I stand with Miss Hart. So does my niece. So should anyone who values truth over gossip. He moved to stand beside Evelyn, and May immediately transferred her grip to his hand, creating a small chain. Cole, May, Evelyn. The symbolism wasn't lost on the crowd. They looked like a family. Jake and Tom moved to flank them. Then Nora joined them. Reverend Hale stepped forward as well. One by one, others followed the doc who'd seen Evelyn tend scraped knees without complaint, the baker whose son was finally learning arithmetic, even Mrs. Holcomb dragging her reluctant husband. Soon, more than half the crowd stood with them, leaving Grady and his men isolated. The merchant's face had gone red, then purple. "This isn't over," he snarled. "You think you've won something? I own half the debts in this town. I can make life very difficult for all of you." "Try it," Cole said quietly. "See how far threats get you." Grady gathered his men and stalked away, but not before shooting Evelyn a look of pure venom. She shivered despite the warm evening. As the crowd began to disperse, returning slowly to their festivities, Reverend Hale raised his voice. "Before we continue our celebration, I'd like to say something. Family isn't just blood. It's the people who choose to stand beside us. Today, I saw this community choose to be a family. That's worth celebrating." The fiddle music resumed, tentative at first, then with growing confidence. Children returned to their games, adults to their conversations. But something had shifted. The lines had been drawn clearly, those who stood for community against those who would tear it down for profit. As evening fell and lanterns were lit, Evelyn found herself walking with Cole and May through the festival. They looked at quilts and preserves, watched a puppet show, shared a funnel cake, two observers. They might have seemed like any other family enjoying the harvest festival. "Thank you," Evelyn said quietly when May ran ahead to watch a juggler. "For standing up again." "Not just me this time," Cole pointed out. "The whole town, mostly. Led by you." He was quiet for a moment. "My brother used to say that evil wins when good people stay quiet. I stayed quiet when he was accused of rustling. Thought the law would sort it out. By the time I spoke up, it was too late. He died in that accident before he could clear his name." His jaw tightened. "Won't make that mistake again." Evelyn wanted to touch his arm, offer comfort, but propriety held her back. Instead, she said, "He'd be proud of you, of how you're raising May." "Maybe." Cole's expression softened as he watched his niece laugh at the juggler's antics. "She's speaking more every day. That's because of you. That's because she feels safe. You gave her that." They stood in comfortable silence, watching May. Around them, the festival continued, music and laughter, the simple joy of community. But Evelyn couldn't shake the memory of Grady's threat. He wouldn't give up easily. "He'll try something else," she said quietly. "Probably." Cole turned to look at her fully. "But you're not alone in this. Not anymore." The weight of his words, the promise in them, made her chest tight with emotion. "Cole, people are already talking about us, after today, standing together like that." "Let them talk." His voice was firm. "I've done nothing I'm ashamed of, and neither have you. If people want to make something more of it." He paused, something flickering in his eyes. Would that be so terrible? The question hung between them, loaded with possibility. Before Evelyn could respond, May came running back, grabbing both their hands. "Fireworks," she said excitedly, a complete sentence. another breakthrough. They let her pull them toward the field where families were spreading blankets for the fireworks display. Cole produced a blanket from somewhere, and they settled onto it. May, between them. As the first rockets burst overhead in showers of gold and crimson, Evelyn felt a strange sense of rightness. This wasn't how she'd imagined her life going. She'd planned to teach quietly, pay her debts, support her mother. She hadn't planned on scandal or threats or standing up to powerful men. She certainly hadn't planned on Cole Thatcher, with his quiet strength and fierce protectiveness. But as May oohed at a particularly spectacular burst of blue stars, as Cole's hand found hers in the darkness and squeezed gently before letting go, Evelyn thought that maybe unplanned wasn't always bad. Maybe sometimes life gave you what you needed instead of what you thought you wanted. Later, as the festival wound down and families drifted home, Cole walked Evelyn to her buggy. May had fallen asleep against his shoulder, worn out from excitement. "I'll see you Tuesday for the next lesson," he asked quietly, shifting May's weight. "Of course." "Evelyn." He seemed to wrestle with words. "What I said earlier, about people making assumptions. I didn't mean to presume." "You didn't," she interrupted gently. "And to answer your question, no, it wouldn't be so terrible. But Cole, I have obligations, debts. My mother depends on me. I'm not free to just follow my heart." "I understand obligations," he said simply. "Better than most. But Evelyn, that doesn't mean you have to face them alone." He helped her into the buggy, his hands lingering on hers for just a moment. "Tuesday, then." As she drove away, Evelyn looked back to see him still standing there, May asleep in his arms, lantern light casting long shadows behind them. Her heart was so full it hurt. Back at her room, she found a letter shoved under the door. For a moment she feared another attack, but it was addressed in her mother's shaky hand. She tore it open, hungry for news from home. "My dearest daughter, your last letter brought such joy. To know you are teaching, making a difference, it eases my heart. Do not worry so much about the money. Yes, we have debts. But what good is a life lived only in service to fear? I've been thinking much lately. Perhaps because the doctor says my time grows short. My greatest regret is that I let fear keep me from so many chances at happiness. Don't repeat my mistakes. Dear one, if you find love in that wild place, don't let debt or duty steal it from you. Money can be earned, debts can be paid. But chances at real happiness are rare as desert rain. Choose joy, my darling girl. Choose love. Let an old woman live through your courage. All my love. Mother." Evelyn read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Her mother, always so proper, so concerned with respectability, was telling her to choose happiness over duty. The world had turned upside down indeed. Outside her window, the last of the festival lanterns flickered in the wind. Tomorrow would bring new challenges Grady wouldn't give up. Winter was coming, debts still pressed. But tonight, she'd stood with good people against lies. Tonight, a little girl had laughed at fireworks. Tonight, a good man had held her hand in the darkness. Evelyn folded the letter carefully and placed it in her Bible. Then she knelt and prayed for strength, for wisdom, for courage to face whatever came next. And maybe, just maybe, for the chance at the happiness her mother wanted her to find. The candle flickered in the draft from the window, casting dancing shadows on the wall. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its mate. And in a modest room above a millinery shop, a young teacher began to believe that maybe, despite everything, she was exactly where she belonged. The blizzard struck without warning on the second Tuesday of November, turning the afternoon sky black as night. Evelyn had just dismissed her students early, sensing the storm's approach in the plummeting temperature and eerie stillness. Most of the children hurried home with parents who'd come to collect them, but May remained, sitting quietly at her desk. "Your uncle will be here soon," Evelyn assured her, though worry gnawed at her stomach. The Double T Ranch was 5 miles out, and the storm was moving fast. May nodded, returning to her primer. She'd been writing simple sentences all week, each one a small triumph. Now she carefully formed the words, "Uncle Cole comes for me." The wind hit the schoolhouse like a fist, rattling windows and sending icy fingers through every crack. Within minutes, the world outside disappeared behind a solid wall of white. Evelyn could barely see the fence posts 10 feet from the door. "We'll be warm in here," she said, keeping her voice calm. She added more wood to the stove, grateful she'd stocked extra after last week's cold snap. "Would you like to help me make some tea?" They were measuring tea leaves when the door burst open, bringing a blast of snow and wind. Cole stumbled in, covered in white from head to toe, ice crystals in his beard. "Thank God," he breathed, slamming the door behind him. "I was halfway here when it hit, could barely find the road." "You rode in this." Evelyn rushed to help him out of his frozen coat. "Couldn't leave you two here alone." His teeth chattered as he moved toward the stove. "But we've got a bigger problem. This is no ordinary storm, it's a full blizzard. We can't stay here." "Why not? We have wood, some food." "This building won't hold." Cole gestured to the walls, which were already groaning under the wind's assault. "It wasn't built for this kind of weather. We need to get to the ranch." "In this storm, Cole, we can't see 3 feet." "I know a way." He knelt beside May, who'd gone very still. "Remember the old creek bed? Sweetheart, the one we explored last summer, it runs almost from here to home, and the banks will give us shelter from the wind." May nodded solemnly. She trusted her uncle absolutely. Evelyn realized. The question was, did she? "Get whatever supplies you can carry," Cole instructed. "Food, water, blankets. Evelyn, you have warm clothes here." She nodded, already moving. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, "Choose courage." Well, staying in a building that might collapse took one kind of courage. Following Cole Thatcher into a blizzard took another. They prepared quickly, Evelyn wrapping May in every spare piece of clothing from the charity box. Cole fashioning a rope line between them so no one could get separated. He tied one end around his waist, created a loop for May in the middle, and secured the other end to Evelyn. "Stay close," he shouted over the wind. "Don't let go of the rope for any reason." They plunged into the white fury. The cold hit like a physical blow, stealing breath and thought. Evelyn couldn't see Cole ahead of her, could barely see May just feet away. The wind screamed in her ears, and snow stung every exposed bit of skin. Then they were sliding down into the creek bed, and suddenly the wind dropped to a manageable roar. The banks rose on either side, creating a natural corridor. Drifts were already forming, but Cole pushed through them steadily, creating a path for May and Evelyn to follow. Time lost meaning in that white tunnel. Evelyn's world narrowed to the rope in her hands. May's small form ahead of her, the rhythm of one foot in front of the other. Her skirts grew heavy with snow, her fingers numb despite her gloves. Still they pushed on. May stumbled, crying out the first sound she'd made since the storm hit. Evelyn caught her, and Cole was there instantly, scooping his niece into his arms. "Almost there," he promised, though Evelyn couldn't imagine how he could tell. Everything looked the same, white and terrible and endless. Then, miraculously, shapes emerged from the blur. The barn, the house. Cole led them to the kitchen door, fighting to open it against the wind. They tumbled inside in a heap of snow and exhaustion. "Fire!" Cole gasped. "Need to warm her up." May was shivering violently, her lips tinged blue. Evelyn's training took over. She'd dealt with exposure before. Children who'd stayed out too long in Missouri winters. She helped Cole strip off May's wet outer clothes, wrapped her in blankets from the cedar chest, and settled her near the stove. "Sugar water," she told Cole. "Warm, not hot, and dry clothes for all of us." They worked in efficient tandem, focused on May. Gradually, the little girl's shivering eased and color returned to her cheeks. She sipped the sugar water obediently, her eyes growing heavy. "Sleep now, sweetheart," Cole murmured, carrying her to the settee near the fire. "You were so brave." Only after May was settled did they tend to themselves. Evelyn's hands were so numb she couldn't manage her buttons. Cole helped, his own fingers clumsy with cold, both of them too exhausted for embarrassment. He found her one of his brother's shirts and a pair of wool trousers, turning his back while she changed. When they were both in dry clothes, they collapsed at the kitchen table. Outside, the storm raged with increasing fury, but inside was warm and safe. Cole made coffee, strong and black, and they drank in silence. "Thank you," he said finally, "for trusting me, for helping with May." "Thank you for coming for us." Evelyn wrapped her hands around the warm mug. "How did you know the storm would be this bad?" "Old break in my shoulder aches before big weather. Plus the horses were acting spooked all morning." He stared out the window at the white, nothing beyond. "This'll last through the night at least. Hope you don't mind being stuck here." "There are worse places to be stuck." Something in her tone made him look at her sharply. In the lamplight, with her hair loose from its pins and wearing his oversized clothes, she looked younger, vulnerable, but her eyes held that steel he'd come to admire. "Evelyn, He stopped, shook his head. "You should sleep. Take my room upstairs. I'll stay down here with May." "I can stay with her. You need rest too." "I need to keep the fires going. Besides," a wry smile touched his lips, "wouldn't be proper, us both sleeping upstairs." Propriety. Evelyn laughed, but it held no humor. "After everything, the scandal, the threats, nearly dying in a blizzard, we're worried about propriety." "Maybe especially then." Cole said quietly, "Your reputation's taken enough hits. I won't add to them." She studied him, this man who'd risked his life to reach them, who was now worried about sleeping arrangements. "My mother wrote me recently. She said respectability without happiness is a cold comfort." "Your mother sounds wise." "She's dying," Evelyn said baldly. "Consumption. The doctor gives her months at most, and her last wish is for me to choose happiness over duty." Cole reached across the table, covered her hand with his. "I'm sorry." "She'd like you," Evelyn continued. "A man who protects children, who stands up for what's right, who makes sure the proprieties are observed even in a blizzard." "Evelyn, I'm not asking for anything," she said quickly. "I know there are complications, obligations, but Cole, if we're going to be trapped here by snow, can we at least be honest? You feel it too, don't you? This connection." His hand tightened on hers. "Yes." The simple word hung between them, more intimate than any declaration. They sat there, hands linked across the scarred table, while the storm raged outside and May slept peacefully by the fire. "In the spring," Cole said finally, "after the debts are settled and the ranch is secure, after your teaching contract is fulfilled, would you let me court you properly? And until then, we're friends, partners in helping May, two people who survived a blizzard together." He squeezed her hand once more, then let go. "It's not what I want, but it's what's right." Evelyn wanted to argue, to point out that life was uncertain, that waiting for perfect timing might mean waiting forever. But she saw the resolve in his eyes and recognized it the same determination that had guided them through the storm. "All right," she agreed. "Friends, for now." A thud against the barn made them both jump. Cole frowned, moving to the window. That wasn't the wind. Another thud, then another. Cole grabbed his rifle from above the door. "Someone's out there." "In this storm, stay with May." He was already pulling on his coat. "Cole, no!" But he was gone, swallowed by the white fury beyond the door. Evelyn moved to the window, straining to see, her heart hammering. Long minutes passed. Then movement by the barn. 2 figures, no 3, struggling through the snow. The door burst open. Cole half-carried Jake, who was bloodied and barely conscious. Tom stumbled in behind them, supporting his left arm. "What happened?" Evelyn rushed to help. "Grady's men," Tom gasped. "They came during the storm, tried to fire the barn, spook the horses into the blizzard. Where we couldn't round them up till spring," Jake added weakly. "If ever." Evelyn helped Cole get Jake to a chair, examining the gash on his temple. "This needs stitching." "There's a kit in the pantry," Cole told her, his face grim. "Tom, your arm." "Dislocated." Jake popped it back, "but it hurts like the devil." While Evelyn tended Jake's wound, Cole made a sling for Tom. The 2 cowboys had fought off 5 men in the middle of a blizzard, protecting the ranch's precious horses. "They'll be back," Jake warned. "Bert Hutchins was with them. Said Grady wants this ranch bad enough to risk murder charges." "Let them come," Cole said coldly. "We'll be ready." "Boss," Tom said carefully. "There's something else. Saw fresh lumber in their wagon, the kind you'd use for building quick-like." Cole's expression darkened further. "They're planning to build on the disputed boundary, possession being 9/10 of the law." Evelyn finished tying off the stitches, her mind racing. "Is that why they wanted the horses scattered? So you couldn't patrol the boundaries?" "Smart as she is pretty," Jake murmured, then colored. "Begging your pardon, Miss Hart." "No pardon needed," she said crisply. "How many horses did they get?" "None," Tom said with satisfaction. "Though Bert may be singing higher after where Jake kicked him." Despite everything, Cole smiled. "Good men, both of you." They settled the cowboys in the bunkhouse, which was connected to the main house by a covered walkway, a design that proved its worth in weather like this. Evelyn checked Jake's bandage once more, promised to look in on them later, then returned to the kitchen. May had slept through it all, exhausted by their ordeal. Cole stood by the window, watching the storm. "It's escalating," Evelyn observed quietly. "Yes." "What will you do?" "Fight back, but smart, not wild." He turned to her. "This isn't your battle, Evelyn. When the storm clears, you should distance yourself from me, from the ranch. Grady's already used you once to get at me. He'll do it again." "No." "Evelyn." "No," she repeated firmly. "He used me because he saw me as weak, isolated, an easy target. But I'm not alone anymore. Am I? I have friends. Nora, Reverend Hale, the parents who support me. You." She moved to stand beside him. "Running won't solve anything. It never has." "This could get dangerous." "It already is dangerous. Those men came in a blizzard. Cole, they're desperate. Desperate men do desperate things." She thought of her mother's letter. "I'm tired of letting fear dictate my choices." He studied her for a long moment. "You're sure?" "I'm sure." "Then we face it together, all of it." Outside, the blizzard howled like a living thing, battering the house with frozen fists. But inside, the fire crackled cheerfully. May slept peacefully, and 2 people stood side by side, looking out at the storm. "I should check on the men," Evelyn said eventually. "I'll come with you." They made their way to the bunkhouse, where Jake and Tom had built up the fire and were sharing a bottle of whiskey for medicinal purposes. The cowboys straightened when they entered, trying to look less comfortable. "How are you feeling?" Evelyn asked, checking Jake's pupils for signs of concussion. "Like I went 10 rounds with a grizzly," Jake admitted. "But I've had worse." "When?" Tom scoffed. "That time in Cheyenne when that dance hall girl's husband came home early." "Jake!" Cole warned. "Right. Sorry, Miss Hart." Evelyn hid a smile. "Rest, both of you. We'll bring food when the storm eases." Back in the main house, they found May awake, looking around anxiously. "We're here, sweetheart," Cole said immediately. "Just checking on Jake and Tom." May nodded, then looked at Evelyn with those two wise eyes. "Stay," she whispered. "As long as you need me." Evelyn promised. They spent the evening quietly, May practicing her letters, Cole mending harness, Evelyn preparing a simple meal from the supplies at hand. It was oddly domestic, oddly right. When May grew sleepy again, Evelyn told her stories about brave princesses and kind cowboys until the little girl drifted off. "You're good with her," Cole observed softly. "She's easy to love." "Not everyone thinks so. Some of the ranch families. They think she's odd because she doesn't speak much. Touched, they say." "They're fools," Evelyn said sharply. "She's brilliant. She just needs time and patience." "And love," Cole added. "Something she's had too little of since her parents died." They lapsed into comfortable silence, the storm providing a constant backdrop. Finally, as the clock struck 10, Cole stirred. "You should rest. Take my room, as I said. I'll stay down here. I know. Cole." She waited until he looked at her. "Thank you for everything today. Thank you for trusting me, for being here." He paused, then added quietly, "Spring can't come soon enough." She understood what he meant, spring, when they could explore whatever was growing between them without the weight of winter, debts, and dangers. "No," she agreed. "It can't." But as she climbed the stairs to his room, Evelyn thought that maybe the waiting wouldn't be so bad. They had work to do, May to teach, a ranch to protect, a community to build, and they'd face it together, friends and partners against whatever storms might come. The blizzard raged on through the night, but inside the Double T Ranch, 3 souls plus 2 battered cowboys slept safe and warm, protected by strong walls and stronger bonds. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: Grady's escalating war, the aftermath of the storm, the complex dance of propriety and desire. But tonight, they were safe. Tonight, they were home. And for now, that was enough. The morning after the blizzard dawned crystal clear and bitter cold. Sheriff Pike arrived at the Double T Ranch just after sunrise, his horse picking carefully through the massive drifts. Cole met him at the door, rifle in hand. "Heard there was trouble out here," Pike said, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "5 of Grady's men tried to scatter my horses during the storm," Cole replied evenly. "Jake and Tom fought them off, but Jake took a bad hit." Pike's face was troubled. "Can they identify the attackers?" "Bert Hutchins, for certain. The others were bundled up, but Tom thinks he recognized Will Slade's bay mare." "That's serious accusations. Cole?" "It's serious crimes. Amos." Cole's use of the sheriff's first name was deliberate. "Are you going to do something about it? Or do I need to handle this myself?" Pike shifted uncomfortably. "Now, Cole, you know I can't arrest men on suspicion." "Then what can you do?" Evelyn appeared beside Cole, still wearing his borrowed clothes from yesterday. "Sheriff, these men attacked during a life-threatening storm. People could have died." Pike's eyes widened slightly at her presence, but he recovered quickly. "Miss Hart, didn't expect to find you here. The storm caught us at the schoolhouse. Mr. Thatcher rescued May and me." Her tone dared him to make something improper of it. "Now, about these attacks." "I'll need statements," Pike said finally, "from everyone involved, and—" He hesitated, then seemed to find some backbone. "There's something else. I found something at Grady's store last night." Cole straightened. "What kind of something?" "The printing press from the newspaper office, the one that was supposedly stolen. It was in Grady's back room, with the plate still set for those handbills about Miss Hart." Evelyn felt Cole tense beside her. "You found evidence that Grady printed those lies?" "I did." Pike looked genuinely upset. "I should have searched sooner. I'm sorry. Miss Hart, I let my—" Obligations cloud my judgment. Obligations. Cole's voice was dangerously quiet. Pike flushed. Grady holds the note on my house. Has since my Alice got sick. Medical bills. He straightened his shoulders. But that's no excuse. I took an oath. What are you going to do about it? Evelyn asked. I'm going to arrest him today for theft of the printing press, if nothing else. It'll be enough to hold him while I investigate the rest. Cole studied the sheriff for a long moment. You sure about this? Amos Grady won't go quietly. Then I'll need deputies. Pike met Cole's eyes. You interested? Yes. I'll be at Grady's store at noon. Bring whoever you trust. Pike turned to go, then looked back. And Miss Hart, I'm truly sorry about those papers. You deserve better from this town. From me. After he left, Cole and Evelyn stood in the doorway, watching his horse struggle through the drifts. He's scared, Evelyn observed. He should be. Grady's got influence, money, mean men. Cole closed the door against the cold. This could get ugly. It's already ugly. She touched his arm. But at least Pike's trying to do right. May appeared at the top of the stairs, rubbing sleepy eyes. When she saw Evelyn, her face lit up. She came down quickly and wrapped her arms around Evelyn's waist. Good morning to you, too, Evelyn said softly, smoothing the girl's hair. Are you hungry? While Evelyn made breakfast, Cole gathered his men. Jake insisted on coming despite his injury. Try and stop me, boss, and word spread quickly. By the time they were ready to ride, they had unexpected company. Nora Byrne sat her horse like she was born to it, a shotgun across her saddle. Heard there might be trouble, she said simply. Reverend Hale had hitched his buggy, bringing several townsmen with him. The law needs support sometimes, he explained. Even Mrs. Holcomb's husband Arthur showed up, looking sheepish. The wife says I've been a coward about all this. Figure it's time to pick a side. By 11:30, they had a proper posse, 15 citizens ready to support their sheriff. Cole felt something ease in his chest. This was what community meant. Stay here with May, he told Evelyn. Tom will stay too. Keep watch. Be careful, she said quietly. Both of you, she added to Jake, who grinned despite his bandages. The ride to town was tense but uneventful. The main street seemed unusually quiet, curtains twitching as they passed. At Grady's store, they found the man himself on the porch, flanked by 6 hired guns. Sheriff, Grady said smoothly. What brings you out in this cold? Silas Grady. Pike's voice only trembled slightly. I'm arresting you for theft of property belonging to the newspaper office. Grady's smile didn't waver. That's ridiculous. I demand to see your evidence. The evidence is the printing press in your back room, with the plates still set for those scandalous handbills. Ah, Grady's expression hardened. I see someone's been spreading tales, breaking and entering. Sheriff, that's a serious crime. I had cause to search. Reports of suspicious activity. From who Thatcher here? Grady sneered. A man desperate to deflect from his own improprieties with the schoolmarm. Cole stepped forward, but Pike held up a hand. That's enough. Come peacefully. Silas. Or what? Grady laughed. You'll shoot me. In broad daylight, I don't think so. He raised his voice. Citizens of Sagebrush Forks, your sheriff is attempting to arrest me on false charges, pressured by Cole Thatcher and his inappropriate relationship with the teacher. Windows opened. People emerged from shops. The street began to fill. The only inappropriate thing here, Nora called out, is you trying to destroy good people for profit? Is it? Grady pulled out a piece of paper. I have here a witness statement that Miss Hart spent the night at the Thatcher Ranch, unchaperoned. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Cole's jaw tightened. Because of the blizzard, Reverend Hale said firmly, "Would you have had them die in the storm for propriety's sake?" One night, Grady's smile was vicious. "What about all those private tutoring sessions? A single woman going to a bachelor's home after dark?" "To teach his orphan niece," someone called out Mrs. Patterson from the boarding house, surprising everyone. "That little girl who wouldn't speak Miss Hart's been helping her." "So she says," Grady countered. "But who really knows what?" The shot came from nowhere, not at anyone, into the air. Everyone froze, then turned to see May standing in the street, Tom's derringer in her small hands, Evelyn beside her. "Liar," May said clearly, her child's voice carrying in the sudden silence. "You're a liar. Miss Hart teaches me. Uncle Cole protects us. You hurt people." The crowd stared. This was the girl who hadn't spoken for months, who many thought simple-minded. Now she stood straight and fierce, glaring at Grady. "May," Cole started forward, but Evelyn stopped him with a gesture. "Mister, Grady wants you to believe lies." Evelyn addressed the crowd, her voice steady. "Why ask yourselves that? What does he gain from destroying my reputation, from attacking Mr. Thatcher's ranch?" "I'll tell you what." A new voice called. Old Samuel Perkins, who ran the land office, pushed through the crowd. "Grady's been buying up debts, foreclosing on properties. But he's not keeping them. He's transferring them to the Mountain Pacific Railroad Syndicate." Shocked voices rose. Perkins continued, "I've kept quiet too long, afraid of my own debts. But seeing this child stand up," he shook his head. "Grady's been working for the railroad all along. They want the whole valley for a new terminus. Can't have it with folks like Thatcher holding water rights." The crowd's mood shifted palpably. Grady's hired guns shifted nervously. "Lies," Grady sputtered. "Baseless accusations." "Are they?" Pike found his courage. "Then you won't mind if we examine your books. All of them." "You have no right." "I have every right. And now, I have witnesses." Pike looked around. "Who else has information about Mr. Grady's dealings?" Hands rose slowly. The baker who'd been pressured to sell, the seamstress threatened with eviction, the farmer whose well had mysteriously gone dry after refusing Grady's offer. "Enough." Grady's composure finally cracked. "You fools. You have no idea what you're dealing with. The railroad will have this valley, one way or another." "Maybe," Cole said quietly. "But not today, and not through you." Grady made a gesture to his men, but they were already backing away. Faced with an armed posse and an angry crowd, their loyalty evaporated. "Bert Hutchins," Pike called out, "you're under arrest too, for assault on Jake Morrison and criminal trespass." Bert tried to run but didn't get far. Jake, bandaged head and all, tackled him into a snowdrift. In the end, Grady went quietly, his bluster exhausted. As Pike led him away, the crowd began to disperse, talking excitedly. The spell was broken. The fear that had gripped the town for months was lifting. Cole reached Evelyn and May, kneeling beside his niece. "That was very brave, sweetheart, but also very dangerous." "Had to," May said simply. "He hurt Miss Evelyn, hurt you." "Where did you get Tom's gun?" May looked guilty. "Borrowed it." "We'll discuss borrowing later," Evelyn said, but she was fighting a smile. "Right now, let's get you somewhere warm." As they walked back to where Tom waited with the wagon, people approached them. Apologies. Mostly. Promises of support. Misses. Dalworth actually asked if Evelyn would consider teaching an adult literacy class. "The world's gone mad," Jake muttered, but he was grinning. At the ranch that evening, they celebrated quietly. Grady was in jail, his schemes exposed. The railroad would likely try again, but without their secret agent, it would be harder. "You took a risk coming to town," Cole told Evelyn as they watched May practice writing by the fire. "It could have gone badly. May needed to face him, Evelyn replied, to use her voice against the man who'd tried to silence it. And I needed to stand with her. Stand with her or with me. She met his eyes. Both. Cole reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Spring's still months away. I know. I'm not sure I can wait that long to court you properly. Then don't. He kissed her. It was gentle, tentative, a question more than a statement. She answered by leaning into him, her hand finding his. Kissing, May announced, not looking up from her writing. They broke apart, laughing. Yes, Evelyn agreed, not embarrassed at all. Sometimes people who care about each other kiss. Good, May decided, and went back to her letters. Later, as Cole drove Evelyn back to town properly chaperoned by May and Tom, she thought about how much had changed. The scandal that had threatened to destroy her had instead revealed the town's true character. The community had been tested and, ultimately, had chosen justice over fear. There'll be more trouble, Cole warned as they reached town. The railroad won't give up easily. I know, she squeezed his hand, but we'll face it together. Together, he agreed. As she climbed down from the wagon, May called out, Miss Evelyn. Yes. Love you. Evelyn's eyes misted. I love you too, May. She watched them drive away, May waving until they turned the corner. Then she walked to her room, no longer concerned about whispers or stares. Let people talk. She had work to do, a community to serve, a little girl to teach. And maybe, just maybe, a future to build with a certain rancher who kissed like promise and fought like hope. The wind had died down. Leaving the evening still and cold, stars began to appear in the clear sky, bright as the possibilities that lay ahead. Evelyn Hart, who had come to Wyoming to hide, had instead found herself standing tall. Tomorrow there would be challenges. The railroad would regroup. Grady might make bail. Winter would test them all. But tonight, a corrupt man sat in jail. A little girl had found her voice, and love had declared itself despite all obstacles. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. The town square looked different in the late November afternoon light. Where weeks ago people had gathered to spread gossip and lies, now they assembled for something altogether different. Sheriff Pike had organized a public burning of the remaining handbills, and half the town had turned out to watch. Let this be a lesson, Reverend Hale intoned as the flames consumed the slanderous papers, about the power of lies to destroy, and the greater power of truth to heal. Evelyn stood with Cole and May, watching the smoke rise into the cold air. Around them, townspeople who had once whispered behind their hands now nodded respectfully. Mrs. Dalworth had even apologized publicly for her rush to judgment. It's over, May said quietly, her vocabulary expanding daily under Evelyn's tutelage. The bad papers are gone. Yes, sweetheart, Cole agreed, his hand finding Evelyn's. That part is over. But they all knew it was really just beginning. With Grady in jail awaiting trial and his schemes exposed, the town was finding its footing again. The railroad syndicate had sent representatives, but they found a united community, unwilling to be bullied or bought. Miss Hart, Mrs. Patterson approached, looking somewhat sheepish. I owe you an apology. The way I treated you during, well, I was wrong. We all make mistakes, Evelyn replied graciously. What matters is learning from them. Indeed, which is why I wanted to ask, would you consider giving a talk at the church social next week about education? About standing up for what's right? I think the women of this town could learn from your example. Evelyn blinked in surprise. From pariah to role model in a matter of weeks. I'd be honored. As the crowd dispersed, Cole drew her aside. I have something to ask you, somewhere private. They walked to the small park behind the church, May running ahead to chase the last butterflies of autumn. The cottonwoods had turned gold, their leaves falling like coins in the slight breeze. "Evelyn," Cole began, then stopped, running a hand through his hair. "I'm not good at speeches." "Then don't make one," she said gently. He smiled at that. "Fair enough. The truth is, I've been thinking about what you said, about your mother's letter, about choosing happiness over waiting for the perfect moment." "Cole, let me finish. I know we said spring, after debts were settled and contracts fulfilled, but nearly losing you in that blizzard, watching you stand up to the whole town, seeing how May blooms under your care." He pulled something from his pocket. "I don't want to wait." It wasn't a ring they both knew that would be too much, too soon for propriety. Instead, it was a small sprig of sage wrapped with a ribbon, the traditional promise token of the territory. "This isn't a proposal," he clarified quickly. "It's a statement of intent, that I want to court you properly, publicly, with the whole town watching if need be, that when the time is right, when you're ready, I intend to ask for your hand." Evelyn took the sage, breathing in its sharp, clean scent. "And if the town talks, let them talk about how the school teacher and the rancher are courting. Let them see us at church socials and town meetings. Let them watch something good grow for a change. My debts, we'll handle them together. Not," he added quickly, "by me paying them. I know you need to do that yourself, but maybe with better planning. Maybe with the extra income from May's lessons and the adult literacy classes you'll surely be asked to teach. You've thought about this. I've thought about little else." He touched her cheek gently. "What do you say? Evelyn Hart, will you let me court you?" She thought of her mother's words, of choosing joy over fear. "Yes." His smile was like sunrise. He moved to kiss her, then remembered May and settled for squeezing her hand. "Saturday night, the dance at the Grange Hall." "I'll be there." "Uncle Cole," May called, running back with her hands full of golden leaves. "Look for decorating." "Beautiful. Sweetheart, should we help Miss Evelyn get back to town?" As they walked back, Evelyn felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in months. The weight of scandal was lifting, replaced by something warm and promising. That evening, she wrote to her mother. "Dearest Mother, you told me to choose happiness, and I have. The man I wrote about, Cole Thatcher, has asked to court me properly. He's a good man, the best I've known. He has a ranch and a young niece who has become dear to me. The scandal I mentioned has passed. The man responsible is in jail, and the town has rallied around us. I'm no longer just surviving here. I'm building a life. I wish you could meet Cole and May. I think you would love them as I do." "Yes, Mother." I said love. It came quietly, like spring water through rock, but it runs deep and true. Your last letter gave me courage when I needed it most. Please know that your daughter is not just managing, she's thriving. All my love. Evelyn." Saturday's dance arrived with the first real snow of winter. Fat flakes that transformed sagebrush forks into something almost magical. Evelyn wore her best dress, the blue one she'd saved for special occasions, and tried not to be nervous. Nora had insisted on helping her prepare. "First official appearance as a courting couple," the blacksmith said, pinning up Evelyn's hair. "The whole town will be watching." "That's what worries me." "Don't let it. You've already faced them at your worst. This is your best." When Cole arrived to escort her, he was dressed in his Sunday clothes, hair slicked back, looking uncomfortable but determined. May stood beside him in a new dress, practically vibrating with excitement. "You look beautiful," he said simply, and Evelyn felt herself blush like a schoolgirl. The Grange Hall was warm and bright, filled with music and laughter. Their entrance caused a brief hush, then deliberately normal conversation resumed. They'd passed the first test. "Miss Hart." Several of her students ran up, dragging reluctant parents. "Are you going to dance?" "I hope so," she replied, glancing at Cole. "Would you do me the honor?" he asked formally, offering his hand. They joined the other couples for a reel, May clapping along from the sidelines. Cole was a surprisingly good dancer, moving with the same quiet confidence he showed in everything else. "People are staring," Evelyn murmured as they turned. "Let them," he replied. "They're seeing something they should have seen from the start, a teacher and a rancher enjoying each other's company." As the evening progressed, the stares turned to smiles. Other couples spoke to them between dances. May was invited to join the children's games. It was, Evelyn realized, acceptance, not grudging or conditional, but real. During a slower waltz, Cole held her properly but closely, and she allowed herself to lean into his strength. "No regrets?" he asked quietly. "None, you—" "Only that I waited so long to do this." "Uncle Cole," May appeared at his elbow. "Can Miss Evelyn come home with us tonight for cocoa and stories?" "That's up to Miss Evelyn." "I'd love to," Evelyn said, meaning it. "But I should probably—" "I'll drive you back after," Cole promised. "Tom's here with the wagon. All very proper." And it was. They rode through the snowy evening, May chattering about the dance and her new friends. At the ranch, they made cocoa and sat by the fire. May curled between them as Evelyn read from Robinson Crusoe. When May finally fell asleep, Cole carried her to bed. Evelyn tidied up, feeling perfectly at home in the warm kitchen. This could be her life, she realized. Not someday, but soon. Cole returned, snow in his hair from checking the horses. She went right to sleep, happy as I've ever seen her. "She's healing," Evelyn observed, finding her place. "Thanks to you. Thanks to love, to safety, to both of us." He crossed to where she stood by the window, watching the snow fall. "Evelyn, I need to tell you something." Her heart skipped. "What is it?" "I love you." The words were simple, direct, so very Cole. "I don't expect you to say it back, not yet, but I needed you to know. I love your strength, your kindness, the way you see the best in people even when they don't deserve it. I love how you've brought May back to life. I love—" "Cole." She turned to face him fully. "I love you too." His eyes widened. "You do? Did you think I'd agree to court a man I didn't love?" "I hoped, but I didn't want to presume." She silenced him with a kiss, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, both were breathless. "I should get you back to town," he said reluctantly. "You should," she agreed, though neither moved. Finally, propriety won. The ride back was quiet but comfortable, their hands linked between them. At her door, he kissed her again, briefly but thoroughly. "Next Saturday," he asked. "There's a quilting bee at the church. May wants to learn." "We'll be there," Evelyn promised, then caught herself. "I'll be there." "No," Cole said softly. "You were right the first time. We'll—" As she prepared for bed, Evelyn reflected on the evening. In a few short hours, they'd gone from secretly caring to publicly courting to privately declaring their love. It was fast by conventional standards, but life in the frontier didn't allow for leisurely courtships. When you found something precious, you held on tight. She picked up the sprig of sage from her dresser. Inhaling its scent, tomorrow would bring new challenges. The railroad issue wasn't resolved. Her mother's health was failing. Winter would test them all. But tonight, she was a woman in love, being courted by a good man who loved her in return. Tonight, a little girl slept peacefully, dreaming of dances and stories and belonging. Tonight, a future that had seemed impossible was suddenly brilliantly real. The first night of their official courtship had ended with declarations of love and promises of tomorrow. It wasn't the scandal the handbills had predicted, it was something far better. It was the beginning of a family, forged in adversity and strengthened by choice. Outside, Snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in pristine white. A new chapter, a fresh start, a clean page on which to write their story. And Evelyn Hart, who had come to Wyoming to disappear, found herself instead stepping into the light, ready to be seen, to be known, to be loved. The sage sprig lay on her pillow as she slept, its fragrance mingling with her dreams of spring weddings and children's laughter and a life built on truth instead of lies. Tomorrow, she would wake and face whatever came. But tonight, for the first time in longer than she could remember, Evelyn Hart was simply, completely happy. Spring came early to Wyoming that year, bringing with it the sweet scent of sage blossoms and the sound of mountain streams running full with snowmelt. The schoolhouse had been freshly painted, white with green trim, and a vegetable garden now flourished beside it, tended by eager young hands. Evelyn stood at the doorway, watching her students work in the garden. Samuel Holcomb was showing the younger children how to thin the carrot seedlings, while May helped little Emma Watson tie up the bean plants. It was hard to believe this confident, chattering girl was the same silent child who'd hidden behind door frames just 6 months ago. "Miss Hart," May called out, her face bright with excitement. "Look, the first tomato!" "Wonderful, we'll have fresh vegetables for the summer picnic." The transformation wasn't just in May or the garden. All of Sagebrush Fork seemed renewed, with Grady convicted and serving time in the territorial prison. The shadow of corruption had lifted. The railroad still coveted the valley, but they now had to deal with a united town council that Cole helped establish, one that put community interests first. "Fine-looking garden," a familiar voice said behind her. She turned to find Cole leaning against the fence, his hat tilted back, a smile playing at his lips. "Shouldn't you be working on your own planting?" she teased. "All done. Jake and Tom have things well in hand." He grew serious. "I actually came to tell you something. Sheriff Pike stopped by this morning." Evelyn's stomach tightened. "Is there trouble?" "The opposite. The territorial judge reviewed all of Grady's dealings. Every debt he bought through coercion is being invalidated, including," he paused meaningfully, "your mother's." The words didn't register at first. "What?" "The debt's gone. Evelyn, the judge ruled that since Grady obtained it through fraudulent means charging illegal interest, adding false fees, it's null and void. You're free." She gripped the door frame, legs suddenly weak. Free, after months of scraping every penny, of going hungry to make payments, of the constant weight of obligation free. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I can't believe it." Cole vaulted the fence and drew her into his arms. "Propriety be forgotten. Believe it. You can write your mother tonight with good news for once." "My mother—" Evelyn pulled back, wiping her eyes. "I had a letter yesterday. The doctor says she's improving. The dry air at the sanatorium. The rest, she might actually recover." "That's wonderful." "She wants to come here, to see the place that's brought her daughter such happiness." Evelyn smiled through her tears. "To meet the man who's stolen my heart, as she puts it." "I'd be honored to meet her." Cole cupped her face gently. "Speaking of which, Evelyn, we've been courting properly for 4 months now. The whole town has seen us at every dance, every church social, every public event. I think we've more than satisfied propriety." Her heart began to race. "What are you saying?" He dropped to one knee right there in the schoolyard, pulling out a small velvet box. Several students noticed and began gathering, wide-eyed. "Evelyn Hart, you came to this town seeking refuge and ended up saving us all. You brought my niece back to life, stood up to corruption, and showed us what real courage looks like. You've made my house a home and my life complete. Will you marry me?" "Uncle Cole's proposing!" May shrieked, and suddenly the entire school was crowding around. Evelyn looked down at him, this good, steady man who'd protected her honor, fought for her reputation, and loved her through scandal and storm. "Yes," she said simply. Of course. Yes. The children erupted in cheers as Cole slipped the ring on her finger, a simple gold band with a small sapphire that caught the spring light. He stood and kissed her, brief but thorough, while the students applauded. When? May demanded, bouncing on her toes. When's the wedding? Soon, Cole promised. Would June suit you? He asked Evelyn. June is perfect. News of the engagement spread through Sagebrush Forks like wildfire, but this time the gossip was joyful. Nora offered to make decorative ironwork for the ceremony. Mrs. Patterson insisted on hosting an engagement party. Even Mrs. Dalworth contributed, organizing the churchwomen to create a wedding quilt. The transformation was remarkable. The same town that had been ready to run Evelyn out over false scandal now embraced her upcoming marriage with enthusiasm. It was, Reverend Hale noted during Sunday service, a testament to the power of truth and redemption. 2 weeks later, Evelyn's mother arrived on the afternoon train, thin but with color in her cheeks and brightness in her eyes, watching her embrace her mother on the platform. Cole felt his throat tighten. Family, they were becoming a real family. So you're the young man who's captured my daughter's heart, Mrs. Hart said, studying him with eyes as keen as Evelyn's. I'm the lucky man she's agreed to tolerate, Cole replied, which earned him a laugh. I like him, Mrs. Hart announced to Evelyn. He doesn't put on airs. They settled Mrs. Hart in the boarding house's best room, though she spent most of her time at the ranch, teaching May to embroider and telling embarrassing stories about Evelyn's childhood. The wedding preparations consumed the town's attention, a welcome celebration after the harsh winter. June arrived in a burst of wildflowers and birdsong. The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, the sky that impossible blue that only happens in Wyoming. The church was packed, every seat filled and people standing in the aisles. Evelyn wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit and updated with new lace. May stood as her flower girl, strewing rose petals with great solemnity. Jake was Cole's best man, still sporting a faint scar from the winter's battles, but grinning broadly. Dearly beloved, Reverend Hale began, we gather today to witness something precious, not just the union of two people, but the triumph of love over adversity, of truth over lies, of community over division. As they exchanged vows, Evelyn thought about the journey that had brought them here. A scandalous lie had tried to destroy her, but instead had revealed the man who would become her husband. An orphan child's silence had drawn them together. A community's eventual choice of justice over fear had made this day possible. Cole, take you, Evelyn, to be my wife, to stand beside you against whatever storms may come, to cherish your strength and protect your dreams, to love you with all that I am, for all my days. Evelyn, take you, Cole, to be my husband, to build a life with you founded on truth and tenderness, to help raise May with wisdom and love, to choose you again every morning, for all my days. When Reverend Hale pronounced them husband and wife, the church erupted in celebration. As they walked back down the aisle, Evelyn spotted familiar faces, Nora wiping away tears, Sheriff Pike standing proud in his uniform, the Holcombs beaming, her students waving wildly. Outside, the town had prepared a surprise. Tables laden with food filled the church grounds. Musicians tuned their instruments. It seemed all of Sagebrush Forks had come to celebrate. Speech, someone called out, and Cole groaned. You asked for this, Evelyn whispered, laughing. He cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable but determined. I'm not one for speeches, but I'll say this: 6 months ago, this town nearly lost something precious because we let fear and lies divide us. Today, we're all here celebrating because we chose to stand together. My wife, he paused, smiling at the word, showed us what real courage looks like. May found her voice, this community found its conscience, and I found the love of my life. That's worth celebrating. The party lasted well into the evening. As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, the newlyweds finally escaped to the ranch. Mrs. Hart would stay with May for the night, giving them privacy for their wedding night. Standing on the porch of what was now their home, Evelyn marveled at the view. The valley stretched out before them, green with spring growth. Their cattle grazed peacefully. In the distance, she could see the creek where everything had started, now just a silver ribbon in the landscape. "Any regrets?" Cole asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Only one," she said. "I wish we'd ignored propriety and married months ago." He laughed, spinning her around. "Mrs. Thatcher, are you suggesting we should have scandalized the town after all?" "Maybe a little scandal isn't always bad," she said, pulling him down for a kiss. "After all, look where it led us." Later that evening, after they'd celebrated their union in the privacy of their bedroom, they lay together watching stars appear through the window. The house was quiet, peaceful, filled with the promise of the life they'd build together. "I love you," Cole said simply. "Thank you for choosing to stay, for choosing us." "I love you too," Evelyn replied. "And I didn't just choose to stay. I chose to live, really live, for the first time in my life." As spring turned to summer, the ranch flourished. The school grew. Adding a second teacher to help with the increasing enrollment, May continued to blossom, her vocabulary expanding daily, her laughter a constant presence in their home. Mrs. Hart's health improved steadily, the mountain air and her daughter's happiness better than any medicine. The railroad made one more attempt to buy the valley, sending smooth-talking lawyers with hefty offers. But they found a community that couldn't be bought or intimidated. The water rights remained with the ranchers, the town retained its independence, and the railroad had to content itself with negotiating fair agreements. One evening in late July, as they sat on the porch watching May chase fireflies, Evelyn felt a flutter in her belly that had nothing to do with dinner. She'd suspected for weeks, and now she was certain. "Cole," she said quietly, "how do you feel about expanding our family?" He looked at her sharply, hope dawning in his eyes. "Are you?" "I think so. I'll see Doc Morrison tomorrow to be sure, but—" He pulled her into his arms, laughing with pure joy. "A baby, our baby." "May's going to be a big sister," Evelyn said, smiling at the thought. "She'll be wonderful, just like her aunt." He paused. "Can I call you that now, or aunt?" "I'd be honored," as if summoned by her name. May came running up, jar of fireflies in hand. "Look, I caught 5. What are you smiling about?" "Just thinking about how happy we are," Cole said, ruffling her hair. "All of us together." "Me too," May said simply, then ran off to show her fireflies to Grandmother Hart. The creek where it all began still ran clear and cold through the valley, but now it was just water, not a source of scandal or shame. The handbills that had once threatened to destroy were long burned, their lies scattered like ash on the wind. In their place grew something stronger, a love tested by fire, a family forged from loss and hope, a community that had learned to choose truth over convenient lies. Evelyn Hart Thatcher, who had come to Wyoming to hide from the world, had instead helped change it. One student, one stand, one choice at a time. And in the process, she'd found everything she never knew she was looking for: love, purpose, home. The stars wheeled overhead, constant and eternal, blessing the valley with their light, and beneath them, a teacher and a rancher sat together, planning their future, grateful for the unexpected paths that had led them to each other. Spring would come again, as it always did, but this time, they would greet it together, ready for whatever new growth it might bring. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and exchange thoughts about this tale of love and redemption in the Old West. If you enjoyed this story, Please subscribe to Wild West Night, give this video a like, and hit that hype button to help more people discover these frontier tales of courage and romance. Your support means the world and helps keep these stories alive.